Nice to see you guys, Mary. Nice to have you. We're going to use a ball and a blanket today. So just blanket or towel, having those handy. And then find a nice comfy seat. Something that feels like you can settle into it. I think seat will be as active as we make it this morning. So if you can get here, life should be good. And then let's just let the eyes close and we'll just settle into our breath, finding something that feels really supportive and nourishing. Supportive and nourishing. We'll give ourselves about 60 more seconds as we center in, as you're feeling into that breath, start to develop that protective membrane around your mat so that the mat itself becomes a sanctuary, and any observations or distractions beyond the boundary of your mat can be set aside, knowing that you can come back to them just a little over 60 minutes and they'll still be there for you. The next time that you exhale, let's let the chin tuck down to the sternum. As the chin tucks down and you get that flexion in the cervical spine, see if you can retract the scapula in a way that offers ease in the posterior chain. So trying to create space here. So it's very easy to just crank back and like put more tension on the cervical spine, but can you extend back and create more space, and then use that space to let the head fall further? Use that softness to let the head fall further into further space. And then keep that shoulder retraction and we'll lift the chin. And then let's just arc the chin back and forth here. A lot of musculature involved in this movement, a lot of levitator musculature, a lot of anterior kind of torso to throat, torso to cervical spine musculature. Really depends on what you do with your chin as to how you access that. If you let your chin be the guide, you'll really get that anterior expansion. And then eventually head comes back to neutral. Big relaxing release here. Let's extend our legs out in front of us. And then remember that you can do a nice big bend. I'm going to suggest a nice big bend, and we'll find a forward fold with as much kind of ease in the legs as is possible. Really trying to play with some of our back musculature. Finding ease in that protective membrane you've crafted. And last 20 seconds here. And then we'll walk our way back up into seat, extend our right leg down the mat, bend the left knee and let that fall out wide or wide-ish, right? If the hip doesn't have that space to open, you can use your prop and just slide that and tuck that underneath for a little support. Think about supporting this leg with either the floor or a prop. And then let's take our right hand over to the top of the left thigh and use that to help rotate, find a twist. We want the shoulder girdle to be relatively neutral. So we're not trying to dip down here. We're trying to stay tall and rotate. And then you can even use that right hand, if it's accessible here, to give a little bit of a pull back. That pull with the right hand will actually help drive that left shoulder back. And then we'll relax back to neutral. And let's just cradle our left leg. You don't even need to lift the ankle, but if you want to lift the ankle, you can place it on top of the thigh. So we're just looking for a little cradle here and a little extension of the spine. You can do that with the leg crossed over, but it doesn't need to be. Left leg is essentially just becoming a handle here. And just trying to activate and lengthen the spine, really flat back. And head playing into that flatness. There should be a long line there. And then we'll relax the left leg so that it mirrors the right. And we'll do the same thing to side two. Right knee bends, right leg falls out wide. And then left hand crosses over and we twist. Again, nice neutral shoulder girdle. Good activity in that front leg. You can pull with the left hand to help increase the rotational capacity, but you don't have to. The goal is just to find a rotation that benefits us. And then when it feels appropriate, when you feel balanced, coming back to neutral again, cradling this leg and however it feels comfortable for you. And then choosing if you want to lift the leg or not, but finding a nice flat and neutral spine all the way through the head. The intention here is to start that connection between flat neutral spine and full hip activation. And then when you feel balanced, we'll release that leg. You can take yourself forward into a fold if that feels good. If not, just find something that allows for a reset. And then we'll walk ourselves back to vertical. Let's grab our blanket. And we'll set that up from shelf fold into like a block fold. So a hamburger and then another hamburger. So we end up with roughly a block. And we're going to place that. Well, we're not going to place that yet. We'll put that next to us. Have your ball just kind of accessible. And then release yourself onto your back. Come onto your back, pretty early, but we have been pretty active in that back musculature. So note how the soft tissue supporting the spine feels, and then we'll lift ourselves into a little bridge and slide the
block like prop underneath us. If you have a block and you want to use that, you're welcome to. But we're just looking for a little supported bridge here, arms falling out towards the sides or towards cactus into a place where they can relax. And then really letting your breath slow down. Really finding fluid inhales and exhales. Really feeling where on the back you are contacting your mat. And then continuing to experience that point of contact further and further. And not necessarily experiencing more, but really focusing on deepening the experience of where your spine is meeting the mat. Those fluid breath, especially the exhale side of the breath. In this ancient city, the very outer edges of human experience. Lived people who celebrated the goddess of light. And they celebrated everything about the goddess of light. How she painted and revealed the hues and the beauty of their world. She imbibed their plants with nourishment. How she revealed the spectrum of experience to each and every one of them. And every day in this city was a celebration of the goddess of light.
Every moment, every breath in the daylight hours was a celebration of this goddess of light. Let's give ourselves about 30 more seconds here, just settling in so that the sacrum is supported and the spine is connecting to the mat. And then when it feels appropriate, we'll lift our tailbone high enough to slide our prop out from underneath us and set that to the side for the moment. And then we'll take our ball and we're going to place that behind the left knee and just close the distance between the calf and the hamstring in a way where the ball is supported there. For some of us, that is going to pretty immediately create a sensation that is very near to all encompassing. And for some of us, we might want a little more pressure. So if you have a very healthy high calf, then you may want to pull that heel closer to your glutes. If you feel like you've had enough, enough is perfect. We will extend the right leg down the mat and then keeping that ball pinched, let your left knee fall out wide. You want a little calf activation. So as you fall out, as the heel may kind of have a tendency to push away and to go away from sensation. If that's where you're happy, wonderful. If you feel like the calf can take a little more, you can kind of inch that heel both closer to your right thigh and closer to the glutes. And then we settle in a place where our arms can relax, whether that be overhead at cactus or by our sides, whatever feels appropriate here. The releasing to the external rotation of the hip likely takes some of the pressure off the calf, and that's kind of the goal here. We don't want to be in a place where we are just agonizing, but we want to manipulate that high calf insertion musculature so that we can make that healthier. So if this still feels like it's too much, you're welcome to pull the ball out. If it feels like it's too light, you can come back up into the top shape. You don't get the external hip rotation, but primary focus is that high calf. So whatever feels best for you here, choose that path. And then we'll just find our way into a breath that is supportive and easy and fluid. Once again, no matter where our leg or ball is positioned, we want the breath to be easy and fluid. And we'll give ourselves about another 60 seconds here.
And then when it feels appropriate, let's pull that ball out, bring our knee back to neutral. Right leg stays extended. So with that right leg extended and then the left knee pointing towards the ceiling, let's exhale and let the left knee fall out wide. And then we'll inhale and let that left knee come back up to neutral. Exhale out wide. Inhale to neutral. And we'll just work through this a few times at our own cycle of breath. Really moving so that the hip can receive, but you may still feel some residual sensation in that calf musculature, especially if that was a very intense position with the ball. And we want to move the hip here until the abductor starts to feel just like a little bit catchy, like there's a little tiny hitch in the way that our hip is moving. And then once you feel that little hitch, we'll just extend the left knee, let that left leg, right leg comparison settle in, and then we'll take the ball over to the second side. So right knee receives the ball that tucks underneath us, underneath the calf hamstring space. And then get your heel to the point where you feel what you want to feel. Want may be the wrong word, but you know what I mean. And then we can let that leg fall out wide if that feels better, more advantageous. And if not, you can keep that knee up and kind of work on additional compressive energy at that high calf. Arms are out in a relaxed position. Please. As much as the people of this little town worship the goddess of light, they had an equivalent amount of fear of the goddess of dark. The goddess of dark was so feared that even shadows were avoided. At night, when the sun went down, the entirety of this town would lock themselves up, board themselves up in their homes. Ensuring that they would be around for the celebration of light that would happen upon sunrise the next morning. And this one particular, very curious young woman had often asked what would happen, why everyone feared the goddess of dark. And she had always received the same messaging. There is no safety in the darkness. It's always been. And yet, this young, curious woman also knew of this wise old sage that lived on a hill outside of the city, an outcast. The sage lived in a little shack without doors or windows. There were just openings. No way to lock up and stay safe when darkness came. Last 45 seconds here on this second side. And when it feels appropriate, we can take that ball out from behind our knee and let that right knee come back to neutral. And then exhale, let the hip fall open, knee fall wide. Inhale back to that neutral alignment. We'll just move with our own breath, looking to fatigue that abductor musculature some. We want to feel that little stickiness, that little catchiness in the movement. And when you do, you can extend that right leg so that it mirrors the left. Ideally, now the legs will feel much more balanced. The landing of the body will feel much more balanced, would be a better way to describe that. And from here, we'll roll right over onto our bellies. So just finding your way onto your belly. Make sure you have access to your blanket. And we're going to half frog our left leg. So blanket could be on the left side. You could start kind of Sphinx-like to get set up. The left knee is peeling out wide. Now the blanket here can provide more height. The height can be kind of work two ways. It can open up that medial line more, or it can also offer softness. It's going to depend on how your body's responding. So play with the depth. You can continue to fold that till it's block-like. You can take that more to that hot dog shape, or you can not use it at all. But we want to find a place where the hip feels nice and open, and then we can just let our hands hold the forehead, or you can turn the gaze towards either the left or the right, whatever feels most beneficial for you. Over the course of time, this young woman's curiosity got the better of her. And so she made her way up the hill to this sage's shack. And she asked the sage how she stayed safe in the darkness of the night, how she was able to keep the goddess of darkness out of her home without locking up. And the sage smiled and sweetly said, "Come to me at the next new moon." And this very curious young woman kept asking questions of the sage, but she would get the same response: "Come to me at the next new moon." And so she went back into town with this deep wonder of what could possibly be an experience of the next new moon.
Remember that the hip girdle is ideally as level as is possible here. So we're not just rolling onto the outer edge of the right hip. We're trying to keep that ilium balance so that that bony structure on the front of the hip zone, that hip girdle, really feels as equivalently balanced as is possible with all the asymmetry going on. Keeping that protective membrane around your mat. And that ease within the exhale side of your breath, allowing you to ground and anchor further and further into this shape. We'll give ourselves about 60 more seconds here. And when it feels appropriate, left leg extends down the mat. And we just land there. Re-feeling into that balance point. Think about how your head, your neck, and your spine align here. And then when you feel ready, we can take that prop over to the second side and extend our right knee out and into frog side two. Thinking about setting the spinal alignment, being anchored across the hip girdle. Thinking about the ilium, those two bones, so that bony structure, pressing into the mat in an as equivalent a way as is possible. And just being at ease.
On the day of the new moon, there is an incredible overcast of the weather. And so the entire sky is clouded and gray. And this curious woman makes her way up to the sage's shack, as was requested. And she sits down and she says, "How do you stay safe from the goddess of dark?" And this sage looks back at her and says, "Wait until the new moon." And so the two sit and talk. And behind the clouds, the sun starts going down and the light starts to fade. And this young, curious woman is experiencing this anxiety as the light is fading further and further. But the sage is just continually pleasantly speaking with her. Until the sun disappears behind the horizon. And the world goes perfectly dark. No stars because of the clouds. It's just darkness outside. And kind of trembling now, this young woman asks the sage again, "How do you stay safe from the goddess of darkness?" And the sage points outside and she says, "Why don't you ask her yourself?" The young woman looks outside and she can't see anything at all. And she pokes her head out of the hut that they're sitting in. She can't see anything at all. She turns back to the sage and she says, "I don't see anyone." And the sage says, "Well, he's not here. You need to go higher." She points up this mountain. The young woman asks, "Will you take me?" And the sage says, "No, I'm too old to make that trip anymore. I'll walk straight and you'll find her." And so, not knowing what to do, this young woman leaves this hut and she starts walking in pure darkness, higher and higher into the mountains. We have about 50 more seconds here on this second side. Just easy, fluid breath in that protective membrane around your mat. Eventually, we'll extend that right leg to mirror our left. Come back into a sphinx-like shape. Let's engage our blanket. And we'll take that from shelf fold to towel length. So we end up with a longer blanket. We'll fold that in half. You can fold it in half again if it's exceptionally wide. We're just going to place the ball on the top end so that the ball can be a little neck adjuster. And then you may need to adjust the positioning of the ball. We're going to want our tailbone to come down onto the mat. I'm going to fold mine in half one more time just to get a little more thickness, but you don't need to do this, right? So we're looking for the appropriate amount of depth and then a neck adjustment. And then we'll just head down, tailbone will end up on the mat, turning over so that we can be on our spine, ball tucking into the middle of the cervical spine, body just held by this prop running right down the middle. If any of this doesn't feel beneficial, doesn't feel right, just slide it out of the way. This will be the last kind of physical propped adjustment we offer. Where the ball sits can be really impactful. So if you know that you have that kind of hump at the base of the cervical spine, you can place there. The middle of the cervical spine gives you a little bit more of that extension articulation. At the top can put some nice sensation at that brainstem, whatever is serving the most benefit here. So eventually, this young woman makes it to the top of this mountain and she sees this being of pure darkness. And she thought she was in pure darkness until she saw this being, this goddess of dark. There is no light within this being. And so even the darkness she was surrounded in now looks bright in contrast. And she gets around this being and she doesn't feel scared. She feels home. She walks up to the goddess of dark and she says, "Why does everyone fear you?" And the goddess of dark lets out this very joyful laugh. And then with a swish of her hand, she clears the sky and the stars are revealed. And she says, "Gaze up into the night sky and tell me what you see."
We'll give ourselves 60 more seconds here. When it feels appropriate, we can bring our knees into a bent position if they aren't already, and let our body fall to one side or the other, whatever side feels most appropriate. Slide that prop out from underneath us. And you can set that to the side unless you want it for Shavasana. We are done with it. And we are back onto our spine, knees towards the ceiling, and just let the knees start to sway side to side. A little lateral movement. Dynamic flow here, finding what feels the most impactful for you. Feeling into that ability to rotate, the ability to balance and utilize the lower and upper halves of the body, to integrate the lower and upper halves of the body. Eventually, we'll let the knees come back to neutral. The bottoms of the feet come together and the knees fall out wide. And so the goddess of dark asks this. Young seeker to look up at the night sky, now clear of clouds, and ask her what she sees. Seeker looks up, and in this total darkness, no moon, she sees stars everywhere. And she turns to the goddess of darkness and she says, I see beautiful and amazing stars filling the night sky. When you're ready, we'll bring our knees back to neutral. Ask ourselves if there's anything we might want, need, or could benefit from prior to Shavasana. And if there is, we'll offer that now. If we have everything that we might want, need, or could possibly benefit from, then we'll drift into a shape where we can appreciate some stillness. And we'll settle in. And so the goddess of darkness chuckles. She says, you humans, you always cherish the light, for it is the light that reveals your world. And yet, so few of you have realized that it is the darkness, the space between the stars, that provides the canvas for your entire existence. Like a wonderful artist needs a canvas to paint upon, so too your existence needs a canvas to exist upon. Just finding your version of stillness.
in her joyful, boisterous voice, the goddess of darkness continues. Light, though bright and revealing, is finite. It consumes itself to illuminate. Darkness, omnipresent and eternal, does not fade. It holds the potential of all creation. For without darkness, light has no beginning. It is the dark, it is I, that grants light its first spark. Start to bring some movement to our fingers and our toes. To our wrists and our ankles. Elbows and knees. Shoulders. Hips. Neck, head, jaw, eyes, tongue. Eventually, the entirety of the body moves. And from that movement, we'll transition back into a seat. In this seated space, our spine gets tall, breath gets fluid, eyes close. And with your next inhale, we'll bring our hands together at heart center. Over the next 7 days, can you carry a thought with you? The true enlightenment comes not from seeing what is lit before us, but by embracing the darkness that surrounds us. And see how that impacts your experience. Thank you so much for being a part of this morning's practice and for being you. Namaste. Happy Sunday, everybody. Appreciate the heck out of you. Love the heck out of you. I will be back tomorrow night to move, and we'll do this again next Sunday. If I don't see you tomorrow, have a beautiful week. Love you. Mwah.